The moment that shattered everything wasn't some slow-burning realization. It wasn't a gut feeling creeping up on me over weeks. It hit me like a freight train, fast and brutal, turning my stomach inside out before I even had time to brace for impact. It started with a smile. Not mine, hers. I had just gotten home from work, exhausted, hoping for a quiet night. The house smelled like vanilla candles, something she lit whenever she wanted to set a mood. But instead of finding her curled up on the couch, waiting for me like she used to, she was standing in the middle of the living room in a dress I'd never seen before. Red, tight, like she was going somewhere that had nothing to do with me. "Hey, babe," she said, her voice light, almost excited. "I have a surprise." I dropped my keys on the table. "Yeah." She tilted her head, that same teasing smirk she used to flash at me when she wanted something. "I've been seeing someone from work." My body turned to stone. I didn't move, didn't breathe, just stared. "And?" She took a slow step toward me, like she was delivering some kind of twisted joke, but her eyes were dead serious. "He's joining us tonight. He'll show you how to really please me." For a second, I actually thought I misheard her. Like my brain couldn't process the words in the order she said them. Then I laughed. A sharp, humorless thing. "You're out of your mind." Her smile didn't fade. "Come on. Don't be so dramatic. The moment that man sets foot in my house, he won't be walking out. And you'll both be on the street for the neighbors to enjoy." And right on cue, the doorbell rang. I didn't think. I moved, straight past her, toward the door, my pulse hammering. I didn't even know what I was going to do. Drag him out? Smash his face in? Tell him exactly what kind of woman he was dealing with? But when I yanked the door open, it wasn't some slick, overconfident guy standing there, ready to act like he owned my wife. It was my boss, and he looked just as shocked to see me as I was to see him. His eyes darted from me to her. Wait, you're married to him?" The silence that followed was suffocating. My mind was already racing, connecting dots I hadn't even realized were there. The late nights, the new clothes, the sudden interest in work events. I turned to her, my voice quiet. "You're sleeping with him?" She didn't look guilty. She didn't even look surprised. She just shrugged. "Well, this is awkward." The silence stretched so long it felt like the air had thickened around us, pressing against my ribs, making it hard to breathe. My boss, her lover, shifted uncomfortably in the doorway. His face twisted in a mix of confusion and panic. The kind of panic that settles in when you realize you've just walked into a situation far uglier than you expected. I turned back to her, still standing in the middle of the living room like she hadn't just detonated a nuclear bomb in our marriage. She was tapping her nails against her arm, waiting. Waiting for what? For me to flip out? For him to speak first? For me to accept this? "Explain?" I said, my voice coming out eerily calm, even though I could feel the storm building beneath my skin. She sighed, actually sighed, as if I was the one being difficult. "Look, I wasn't exactly planning on it happening this way, but since the cat's out of the bag." She waved a hand lazily between us, like she was talking about nothing more serious than a dinner reservation. "I've been with him for a while now. We didn't want to hurt you, but, you know." She gave a helpless little shrug, like this was just some unfortunate accident. "It happened. I didn't look at him. Couldn't. If I did, I wasn't sure what I'd do." Instead, I kept my eyes locked on her, studying every inch of her face, searching for something. Guilt, regret, a trace of the woman I thought I knew. But all I saw was boredom. Like this entire conversation was a formality she just had to sit through before she could get on with her night. Why bring him here? My voice was still calm, but my hands were curled into fists at my sides. "Why this?" Her lips twitched. Was she actually amused? "I thought maybe we could all be adults about this," she said. "I thought." She glanced at my boss, whose face was still a shade too pale. "Maybe you'd be open to new experiences. I mean, we're all grown-ups, right? No need to be possessive." My boss coughed, finally finding his voice. "Madison, don't." I snapped, finally cutting my eyes to him. He shut his mouth. I took a step closer to her, lowering my voice. "So what, you just decided I'd be fine with this? You planned this whole thing without even asking me?" You never would have said yes, she said, like that was a reasonable excuse. So I thought we'd just see how it went. I let out a slow, measured breath, trying to keep my temper from boiling over. This wasn't just cheating. This wasn't just betrayal. This was calculated. This was a setup. My boss finally seemed to realize the gravity of the situation, because he took a step back toward the door. This was a mistake. I should go. You think? I shot back. His eyes darted between us, and then, without another word, he turned and walked back to his car, slamming the door shut behind him. I watched as he sped off, tires screeching against the pavement. Coward. And then it was just us. She folded her arms, exhaling through her nose like I was the one who had ruined her night. Well, that was embarrassing. I actually laughed. A short, humorless sound. Embarrassing, I repeated. That's what you're worried about? She rolled her eyes. Oh my God. Can you not be so dramatic? You're acting like I killed someone. My vision blurred with fury. You killed our marriage. Her lip curled. Please. Like you weren't already boring me to death before this. Something inside me snapped. I walked over to the front door, swung it open wide, and turned back to face her. Get out. She blinked. Excuse me? You heard me. My voice was sharp, final. Get out. She let out a dry laugh. This is my house too. Not anymore. I reached for my phone, unlocking the security app. You've got 5 minutes before I call the cops and tell them you're trespassing. Her eyes narrowed. For the first time all night, she looked rattled. You wouldn't. I held up my phone, my thumb hovering over the dial button. Try me. She stared at me for a long moment, the air between us vibrating with tension. And then, with a huff of disbelief, she grabbed her purse off the couch. You're seriously overreacting, she muttered. I didn't answer. I just watched as she stomped past me, stepping out into the night without another word. As soon as she was gone, I shut the door and locked it. And then, finally, I let out the breath I didn't even realize I'd been holding. The silence in the house felt unnatural. It wasn't the peaceful kind, the kind you sink into after a long day, the kind that makes you appreciate the warmth of home. No, this was something else. It was vacant, hollow in a way that made my skin crawl. It felt like something had been removed from the air itself, leaving behind only the residue of what used to be. I stood there for a long time, my hand still gripping my phone, my thumb frozen over the screen. I could still hear the sound of her heels clicking against the pavement outside, fading into the distance. She actually left, just like that. No fight, no desperate plea for forgiveness, no remorse. And that's what made me realize. She had planned this. She had already accepted this outcome, maybe even hoped for it. That's why she didn't beg. That's why she didn't try to manipulate her way out of it like I'd seen her do with other people in the past. Because she had already moved on. I wasn't her problem anymore. The weight of it all crashed down at once. My legs felt unsteady, so I walked over to the couch and sank down, pressing my palms against my face. My mind was still catching up, replaying every second of what had just happened like a broken tape. She had actually invited me into my own humiliation. She had expected me to sit there, accept it, maybe even God. I couldn't even finish that thought without my stomach twisting in disgust. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. My marriage was over. And not in the slow, painful way most marriages die, where you see it coming, where you try to fight for it but lose anyway. No, mine had ended in one brutal moment, like a bullet to the head. Fast, violent, irreversible. I needed to do something, anything. Sitting here, marinating in the filth of what she had done, wasn't an option. I needed to clear my head, put distance between myself and the mess she had left behind. I grabbed my jacket and keys, ignoring the mess in the living room, her wine glass still half full on the table, the candles she had lit still burning. It felt staged now, like I was walking through the remains of someone else's life, a life that had already ended. The night air hit me like a slap, cold and sharp against my skin. I got in my car and just drove, not even thinking about where I was going. My hands were tight on the wheel, my jaw clenched so hard it ached. I wasn't just angry, I wasn't just hurt. I was humiliated. This wasn't a quiet betrayal, one that would stay behind closed doors, one that I could process privately on my own terms. No, this was something else entirely. My boss. My damn boss. The more I thought about it, the clearer everything became. How had I not seen it? The late nights, the work trips that suddenly became longer, the way she had started dressing differently, the way she always seemed to glow after coming home from the office. I had chalked it up to her just changing, evolving. But no, she wasn't evolving. She was replacing me. My grip on the wheel tightened until my knuckles ached. I knew what I had to do next. This wasn't just about my marriage anymore. This was about him, too. By the time I pulled into the parking lot of the office, the building was dark. No one worked this late except him sometimes. My boss liked to pretend he was a hard worker, but really, he was just the kind of man who avoided going home to whatever life he had built outside of work. I stepped out of the car, breathing in the cold air, trying to steady the anger simmering beneath my skin. I wasn't here to throw punches. I wasn't here to lose control. I was here for answers. The office lobby was locked, but I still had my keycard. I swiped it and stepped inside, the sound of my footsteps echoing in the empty space. The place was quiet, the kind of stillness that only existed after hours, when the chaos of the day had finally bled away. And then, from down the hall I saw it, a single office light glowing through a glass wall. His office. I walked toward it, my pulse pounding, my breath steady. I didn't knock. I didn't hesitate. I pushed the door open, and there he was, sitting at his desk, his tie loosened, his face still twisted with the same guilt and shock I had seen earlier that night. He looked up at me, startled, his eyes wide. "Jesus Christ," he muttered, running a hand through his hair. "What the hell are you doing here?" I stepped inside, shutting the door behind me. The click of the lock was the only sound in the room. "We need to talk." His shoulders sagged. "Look, man, I held up a hand, cutting him off. "No excuses. No bullshit. You're going to tell me everything." He swallowed hard, his gaze darting to the door like he was considering making a run for it. But he didn't, because he knew he owed me this, and I wasn't leaving without the truth. He exhaled through his nose, rubbing his temples like he was the one dealing with the headache here, like I was the problem. That alone almost made me lunge across the desk and wipe that exasperated look off his face. But I didn't. I stayed still, controlled. I wanted to hear him speak first, to see how much he would actually admit before I had to drag it out of him. He leaned back in his chair, tapping his fingers against the armrest. "All right," he said slowly. "What do you want to know?" I let out a dry laugh. "What do I want to know?" I repeated. "I want to know how long my wife's been screwing her way up the corporate ladder. I want to know when you decided to humiliate me not just as a husband but as an employee. I want to know how in the hell you thought bringing this to my home was a good idea." His jaw clenched. He looked down at his desk, like the answers were written there somewhere. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this." "Oh? How was it supposed to happen?" "Then," I snapped. "Were you hoping I'd applaud you? Shake your hand? Maybe pour the three of us some drinks to celebrate how open-minded we all are?" He sighed, leaning forward now, resting his elbows on the desk. "Look, man, he hesitated, running a hand over his face. "It started about 6 months ago. 6 months. I forced myself to stay still, to keep my face blank. But inside, something cracked wide open. 6 months ago, I was planning our anniversary trip. 6 months ago, I was coming home to her, kissing her, telling her I loved her, believing she was mine. She was already gone. He must have seen the way my face shifted, because he hurried to keep talking. It wasn't..." He hesitated again, like he wasn't sure whether to lie or not. "It wasn't serious at first." I let out a slow, dangerous breath. "Not serious? It was just fun," he said. "She told me things weren't great between you two, that she felt trapped, like you weren't paying attention to her anymore." I slammed my fist down on the desk so hard that his coffee cup rattled. "Don't." My voice was ice. "Don't sit there and try to make this my fault." He shut his mouth, his Adam's apple bobbing as he swallowed hard. I leaned forward. "You knew she was married. You knew I worked for you. And still, you decided she was worth screwing over both of us. So tell me..." I tilted my head. "Was she worth it?" His face twisted. Guilt, anger, maybe a little regret. but not enough. Not nearly enough. I didn't plan for this, he muttered. I laughed, sharp and humorless. Yeah? Well, neither did I. He looked away, rubbing the back of his neck. Look, man, I get it. You want someone to blame, but, oh, I don't want someone to blame. I cut in. I already know who to blame. He stayed quiet, gripping the arms of his chair like he was afraid I might actually lunge at him. Maybe I should have. Instead, I took a step back, exhaling through my nose, forcing myself to keep my breathing even. So, I said, voice calm again. Why tonight? He blinked. What? I gestured vaguely. Why now? Why bring this circus act into my house tonight? Of all nights. Did she put you up to it? He hesitated just long enough for me to know the answer. Jesus? I whispered, shaking my head. She really thought I'd just go along with it, huh? He had the decency to look ashamed, at least. She said you weren't like that you wouldn't make a big deal about it. I let out a bitter laugh. Right? Because letting some guy, my boss, walk into my house and rub my nose in my own humiliation is totally something I'd be cool with. He sighed. I don't know what she was thinking, man, but I did. She wasn't thinking at all. Or maybe she was, and this was just the next phase of whatever delusional fantasy she had built in her head. The open-minded, evolved couple who could just casually erase a decade of love and commitment with a new experience. Except that wasn't us. And it never would be. I exhaled, shaking my head again. You're pathetic, I said finally. His jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. I turned and walked to the door. You'd better start updating your resume, I said over my shoulder. Because after I'm done, you won't have a job left to hide behind. He shot up from his chair. Wait, what? You can't just. I looked back at him, arching a brow. Can't I? His face drained of color. He knew exactly what I meant. There were a lot of things in this company that wouldn't survive close scrutiny. And lucky for me, I had access to all of them. He opened his mouth, maybe to beg, maybe to threaten. I didn't care. I just walked out, shutting the door behind me. And as I stepped out into the cold night, I realized something. For the first time in hours, I could actually breathe. The drive home felt different. The anger was still there, burning low in my gut, but it wasn't wild anymore. It wasn't something that controlled me. It was something I controlled now. I knew exactly what I was going to do. By the time I pulled into the driveway, my mind was already calculating, piecing together every move I needed to make next. If Madison thought she was going to walk away from this without consequences, she was about to learn just how wrong she was. The house was dark when I stepped inside. The air still carried the faint traces of her perfume, but the warmth was gone. It wasn't home anymore. It was just walls, just space. I didn't waste time. I grabbed my laptop from the office, sat at the kitchen table, and started typing. First, an email to HR department. Subject: formal complaint, conflict of interest and workplace misconduct. Asterisk, to whom it may concern. It has come to my attention that my direct supervisor, his name, has been engaging in an inappropriate relationship with an employee under his authority. This raises serious ethical concerns regarding favoritism, misuse of power, and potential legal risks for the company. I request an immediate investigation into the matter. Please find attached supporting documentation. Asterisk. I attached everything I could: emails, timestamps, expense reports that suddenly made a lot more sense now. Dinners charged to the company, last-minute business trips that lined up perfectly with her unexplained absences. And then, for the final touch, I CC'd him on the email. Let him sweat. Next, I logged into our joint bank account. I had been stupid before, too trusting. But that was over. Within minutes, I had locked her out, transferred my paycheck to a separate account, and flagged any unusual spending from the last 6 months. And wow, there was a lot of it. Luxury hotel stays, high-end restaurants, a spa day 2 weeks ago that cost more than some people's rent. I shook my head, disgusted, and filed a dispute for every single charge I could. By the time I was done, my phone buzzed. Madison. I stared at the screen for a second, debating whether to even answer. Then, finally, I swiped to pick up. What? She sighed dramatically. Oh, come on. Don't tell me you're still mad. I almost laughed. Still mad? You humiliated me, I said, voice steady. You disrespected our marriage. You planned it. And now you're calling me like it's some minor argument. She groaned. God, you're so predictable. I clenched my jaw. Excuse me? I knew you'd do this, she said. Get all self-righteous. Act like the victim. Like you're some perfect little husband who never did anything wrong. But newsflash? I was bored. Okay? I needed something else. And honestly, I thought you'd appreciate the honesty. I gripped the phone tighter, my nails digging into my palm. You thought I'd appreciate being blindsided by my boss in my own home? She made a sound of annoyance. It wouldn't have been so bad if you had just gone along with it. I went silent, because I realized something. She really, truly thought she did nothing wrong. She thought I was the problem. And that was when I knew this wasn't someone I could reason with. This wasn't a person who had made a mistake and felt remorse. This was someone who felt entitled to my humiliation. And she wasn't going to stop until she had everything she wanted. Unfortunately for her, I had just taken all of that away. Oh, I said, voice lighter now. By the way, you might want to check your email. There was a pause. Then, the sound of her unlocking her phone. A few seconds later, she inhaled sharply. What the hell did you do? I smiled. You mean besides reporting your little office affair? Or locking you out of the bank account? Or maybe you're upset about the fact that I just disputed all your little gifts from him. The silence on the other end was delicious. You... She let out a breath, stunned. You petty little man. Oh, sweetheart, I said, leaning back in my chair. I'm just getting started. And then I hung up. For the first time in months, maybe even years, I felt like I had control again. And it felt good. The next morning, I woke up to chaos. It started with the bang of someone pounding on my front door. The sharp, insistent kind that sent a pulse of irritation straight through my skull. I knew exactly who it was before I even got up. Madison had never been one for patience, especially when things didn't go her way. I rolled out of bed, stretched, and took my sweet time walking to the door. Another round of pounding, louder this time. Open the damn door, you coward. Oh, this was going to be good. I swung the door open to find her standing there in yesterday's dress. Hair slightly disheveled, fury twisting her face. She must have driven here straight from wherever she spent the night after I kicked her out. I wasn't even sure if she had anywhere else to go. Not my problem anymore. You look terrible, I said, crossing my arms. Rough night. Her eyes blazed. Undo it. I blinked. Undo what, exactly? You know what? She shoved past me, marching into the house like she still had a right to be here. The money, the email, everything. I closed the door and turned to face her. Ha! So I guess HR didn't take long to get back to you. She whirled around. You had no right. I had every right. I cut in, voice cold. You brought him into my home, Madison. You treated me like I was nothing. And now you're surprised that I'm not just rolling over and letting you take whatever you want. She let out a sharp, frustrated laugh. Jesus, you're so dramatic. You act like I killed someone. She threw her hands up. I just wanted more. I stared at her. Then you should have left before you spread your legs for my boss. Her mouth snapped shut. A flicker of something crossed her face. Anger, guilt, maybe even the briefest flash of regret. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared. She squared her shoulders, leveling me with a cold stare. Fine. You want to play this game? Let's play. Oh, this I had to hear. I leaned against the counter, arms still crossed. Enlighten me. She stalked closer, lowering her voice to something almost threatening. You think you're so smart, don't you? Locking me out of the account. Embarrassing me at work. Ruining my reputation. She smiled, slow and poisonous. But you forgot something. I raised a brow. Did I? I know everything about you, she said. I know what pisses you off, what scares you, what keeps you up at night. I know exactly how to make your life miserable. I nodded, pretending to consider that. You know what's funny? I used to think the same thing about you. I let the words sink in before I smiled. But it turns out I barely knew you at all. That struck a nerve. I could see it in the way her nostrils flared, in the way her nails dug into her palm. But before she could lash out, my phone buzzed on the counter. I glanced at the screen. Work email. Perfect timing. I opened it, scanning the message quickly before letting out a low whistle. Wow, I murmured. That was fast. Madison crossed her arms. What? I grinned. Your boyfriend just got put on leave while they investigate the complaint. I tilted my head. Think he'll still be so eager to fight for you when his job's on the line? Her lips parted slightly, just enough for me to see the panic creeping in. There it is. I took a step closer, dropping my voice. You know, Madison, I don't think you actually thought this through. She swallowed hard, but her voice was still sharp. You're going to regret this. I smirked. I don't think I will. She held my gaze for a long moment, like she was trying to calculate her next move. Then, with a frustrated huff, she turned on her heel and stormed toward the door. I let her go, but just as she reached the threshold, I called out, "Oh, and Madison?" She paused, gripping the doorknob. I smiled. Don't bother coming back. I've already called a lawyer. Her whole body went stiff. Then, without another word, she yanked the door open and slammed it shut behind her. And just like that, she was gone. I stood there for a moment, listening to the echo of the door slamming shut, feeling the weight of it settle over me. It wasn't the kind of weight that crushed. It was the kind that cleared space, that made room for something new, something better. For the first time in years, my house was quiet. Not the tense, suffocating silence that had filled it for months. The kind where two people pretended nothing was wrong while everything was rotting underneath them. This was different. This was peace. I ran a hand over my face, exhaling slowly. The rage, the betrayal, the absolute humiliation of last night. It was all still there, simmering just beneath the surface. But now it had a purpose. Madison thought she could control the fallout. She thought she could manipulate, gaslight, twist the truth like she always did until she landed on her feet. Not this time. I grabbed my phone and made a call. It rang twice before a deep, calm voice answered. Hey man, everything all right? I hadn't told many people what was going on yet. But if there was one person I could trust to have my back, it was Daniel. Best friend since college, the kind of guy who didn't need a full explanation to know when shit was about to go down. I need a divorce lawyer, I said. There was a beat of silence. Then, all right, how bad are we talking? I let out a dry laugh. Nuclear. He whistled. Damn. Okay, I know a guy. I'll text you his info. Pause. She cheated, didn't she? I pressed my fingers against my temple. With my boss. Daniel let out a low curse. Jesus. You good. I will be. Want me to come over? Bring beer. I almost said yes, but then I looked around at my house, my space finally cleared of her poison. I wanted to sit in this for a while. I wanted to let it settle, let it sink in. Nah, I said. I think I just need to be alone for a bit. Fair enough. But if you change your mind, I'm there. I know. We hung up, and 2 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a text. A name. A number. I wasted no time. I dialed immediately. The receptionist answered in a crisp, professional tone. Law offices of Carter and Graham. How can I help you? Hi, I said, clearing my throat. I need to schedule a consultation with Mr. Carter. It's urgent. She didn't even hesitate. Of course, sir. We can get you in this afternoon. Does 3 p.m. work? Perfect. Yeah, I said. That works. I hung up and leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling for a long moment. This was happening. Madison had expected me to yell, to break down, to beg like some pathetic, heartbroken idiot. That was the game she wanted to play. Push me to the edge, then act like she was the reasonable one when I finally lost it. Instead, I was strategic, and she had no idea what was coming next. At exactly 2:45, I pulled into the law office parking lot, took a deep breath, and walked inside. The office was sleek, modern, designed to intimidate. Exactly what I needed. The receptionist greeted me with a polite smile, then led me into a private meeting room. A few minutes later, the door opened, and a man stepped inside. Mid-40s, sharp suit, no-nonsense expression. This was a guy who won cases. Mr. My last name, he said, extending a hand. I'm Mark Carter. Heard you've got a hell of a situation. I shook his hand. That's one way to put it. He gestured for me to sit. All right, walk me through it. Start from the beginning. So I did. I told him everything. By the time I finished, he sat back, tapping a pen against the desk. Well, he said, she's in for a hell of a surprise. I arched a brow. Yeah. He smirked. She won't see this coming. You have a very strong case for at-fault divorce. And if we play this right, you won't just walk away clean. You'll walk away winning. Winning. I liked the sound of that. Madison had played her game. Now it was my turn. I left the lawyer's office with something I hadn't felt in a long time. Control. For months, maybe even years, Madison had been the one running the show. Deciding the rules, deciding what I knew and what I didn't, deciding that her wants mattered more than the vows we took. She had planned out her affair, manipulated her way into a situation where she thought she could have it all, me, my stability, him, her excitement. But what she never expected was for me to be the one flipping the script. By the time I pulled back into my driveway, I had a clear plan in place. The divorce was going to ruin her, and not because I wanted revenge. No, revenge was too simple, too emotional. This was about making sure she didn't get to rewrite the narrative like cheaters so often do. Because I knew exactly what she would try next. She'd play the victim. She'd say I was controlling, distant, that she had no choice but to seek happiness elsewhere. She'd tell everyone, friends, family, mutual acquaintances, that she had been forced into this, that it was my fault. Not this time. I had receipts, and I was about to make damn sure she felt every consequence of the choices she had made. I barely made it inside before my phone started buzzing again. Madison. I debated ignoring it, but I was curious. Desperate already? I swiped to answer. What? I said flatly. She sighed dramatically, her voice carrying that exasperated tone she always used when she wanted to act like I was being unreasonable. Are you seriously doing this? Doing what, exactly? I said, kicking off my shoes. The lawyer. The bank account. The complaint to HR. She snapped. Are you actually trying to destroy my life? I smirked. Oh, I'm not trying, sweetheart. I am. She let out a bitter laugh. Wow, you really are pathetic. I stayed quiet. I let her talk, let her dig herself deeper. She huffed when she didn't get a reaction. Look, I know you're hurt, but let's be adults about this. Okay? There's no need to be so vindictive. That made me laugh. Vindictive? You plan to humiliate me in my own home, Madison? I said, voice calm. You thought you could break me, and now that you're the one paying for it, you want to act like I'm overreacting? She went quiet. I leaned against the counter. What's wrong? Didn't think I'd fight back. You're such a child, she muttered. This is why I was bored. You never knew how to be a real man about things. There it was, the classic, textbook last resort of every cheater. She had nothing left to argue, nothing left to stand on. So now she had to invalidate me, make me feel like I was the reason she did what she did. Unfortunately for her, I wasn't falling for it. I grinned. If I wasn't a real man, you wouldn't be so scared right now. I'm not scared, she spat. Sure. I yawned. By the way, you might want to start looking for a new apartment. I'm filing for exclusive use of the house. Shouldn't be a problem, considering the circumstances. She gasped. A literal gasp. You can't do that. Oh, but I can, I said. My lawyer seems to think I have a very solid case. But hey, you're more than welcome to fight it in court. Just make sure you can afford the legal fees. That shut her up real quick. Because that was the other thing Madison had never considered. She didn't have money. She had our money. And now, she had nothing. She inhaled sharply, probably realizing it all at once. That she had lost. That no matter how much she insulted me, no matter how much she tried to flip this on me, the facts were undeniable. I was leaving this with everything. And she was leaving with nothing. Finally, her voice softened. Babe, she said, shifting tactics. Come on. We don't have to do this. We can talk. Work something out. I chuckled. You really thought that would work, huh? Silence. Madison, I said, my voice dropping. The only talking we'll be doing is through lawyers. Her breath hitched. And then, in true Madison fashion, she snapped. You are such an ungrateful little piece of... Click. I hung up, blocked her number, and for the first time in years, I felt absolutely, completely free. The next few days passed in a blur, but not the kind where you feel lost or out of control. No, this was the kind where every second was a calculated move, every step forward pushing the knife deeper into the reality Madison never expected to face. She thought she had everything figured out, that she could cheat, humiliate me, and somehow still walk away on top. But she forgot one crucial detail. She had built her life on me, on my stability, my patience, my willingness to overlook the red flags she waved right in my face. And now all of that was gone. The moment I cut her off financially, she must have realized just how deep in trouble she was, because that was when the damage control started. It began with mutual friends, people who, up until now, had been neutral, the ones who had no idea what had been happening behind closed doors. Suddenly, I was getting texts, calls, the same repeated message from different voices. "Hey man," Madison said, "you guys are having some problems. You okay? I heard things got messy. Maybe you two should talk it out." Dude, I get that you're mad, but freezing her out financially? Isn't that a bit much? And that's when I knew she had already started spinning her version of events. I didn't reply to any of them. Not yet. I wanted to see just how far she was willing to go before I played my next hand. Then, right on cue, I got the text I had been waiting for. From Madison. "I hope you're happy. You've turned everyone against me." I smirked at my screen. "From me? No, sweetheart. You did that all on your own." I expected another insult, another tirade about how I was the worst husband in existence. But instead, something else happened. She showed up. It was late, almost midnight, when I heard the knock. Not a loud, demanding one. A softer, hesitant knock. The kind that made me wonder if this was her final attempt at manipulation or if she had truly realized just how much she had lost. I opened the door to find her standing there, arms wrapped around herself, looking small. It was an act. It had to be. "Can we talk?" she asked, voice quiet. I leaned against the doorframe, making no move to let her in. "Talk about what, exactly?" Her eyes flicked past me, looking into the house like she was expecting something to be different. Maybe she thought I'd be miserable, that she'd find me drowning in my own heartbreak, desperate to take her back. But the house was clean, organized, calm, and I was just fine. She swallowed hard. I messed up." I said nothing. She bit her lip, shifting her weight. "I don't know why I did it. I was bored. I held up a hand. "Don't," I said sharply. "Don't stand here and try to feed me that same bullshit." She flinched, eyes widening slightly. Maybe she thought she could still play on my emotions, that I'd crack at the sight of her looking vulnerable. But I wasn't that guy anymore. I straightened, crossing my arms. "You didn't mess up, Madison. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. A mistake is saying something hurtful in the heat of an argument." I tilted my head. "What you did, that was a choice." Over and over again. Tears welled up in her eyes, but I wasn't stupid. Madison didn't cry when she was guilty. She cried when she needed something. And right now, she needed me to fold. "You don't have to forgive me," she whispered. I don't want to lose everything." And there it was. She wasn't here for me. She wasn't here because she regretted what she did, or because she wanted to make things right. She was here because she realized the reality she had built outside of this marriage was crumbling. Her new man was suspended from work, his reputation tanking by the day. The bank accounts were locked. The credit cards she had relied on declined. And now she had nowhere left to turn. I sighed, rubbing a hand over my jaw. "You already have lost everything, Madison." A tear slipped down her cheek. "Please," she whispered. For a brief second, I almost felt bad. Almost. But then I remembered that night. Her standing in the middle of our living room, smiling as she told me to my face that she had been cheating. That she had brought him into my home like it was nothing. Like I was nothing. And suddenly, the sympathy was gone. I took a step back and gripped the edge of the door. "Goodbye, Madison." Her face crumbled. "Wait." I shut the door in her face. And this time, I knew she wasn't coming back. The days that followed felt like waking up after a long, fevered sickness. Like I had finally broken through something toxic. Something that had been poisoning me for years without me even realizing it. At first, there was still that dull ache of betrayal, the kind that sat in my chest like a stone. Not because I missed her, God no, but because I couldn't believe how long I had let myself be blind to who she really was. But the thing about pain, it doesn't last forever. And Madison? She was already fading into nothing. The divorce process moved fast. My lawyer was relentless, slicing through every legal loophole Madison might have tried to cling to. Within weeks, everything was in motion. She had no claim to the house, no access to our shared accounts, and no way to spin the story in her favor. And the best part? Her little side romance with my boss wasn't just a personal scandal. It was a corporate nightmare. After the HR complaint went through, things escalated quickly. He wasn't just put on leave. He was under full investigation for misconduct. And it didn't take long for the higher-ups to start digging into all his shady dealings. Turns out, Madison wasn't the first employee he had gotten a little too close to. Just the most reckless one. I didn't even have to lift a finger. By the time I got the email notifying me that he had been fired, I was already halfway through a celebratory drink. As for Madison, she tried to fight. She tried to act like she still had power in this. But with no job, no steady income, and a reputation that was quickly turning to ash, she had nothing left. One night, I got a text from an old mutual friend, someone who had believed her side of the story at first. From Chris. Bro, just ran into Madison. She looks like absolute shit. What the hell did you do to her? I smirked at my phone. For me, nothing. She did it all to herself. And that was the truth. I hadn't destroyed her. I hadn't ruined her life. She had simply tripped over her own choices and fallen face first into the consequences. I had just stepped back and let it happen. The day the divorce was finalized, I sat in my lawyer's office, staring at the papers in front of me. My name was signed at the bottom. It was over. Mark, my lawyer, leaned back in his chair, glancing at me with a satisfied nod. That's it, he said. You're free. I let out a slow breath, like I had been holding it in for months. Maybe I had. Feels good, doesn't it? Mark asked. I looked at him, smiled. No, I said. It feels fucking amazing. And that was the last time I ever thought about Madison with anything other than indifference.